noise!
Welcome back to the next part of this Truth and Rhythm episode. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. Also become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funknstuff.net. Thank you so much for your interest and support. Enjoy. Hey, before we get started with today's show, I just want to draw your attention to new merchandise. Funkin' Stuff and Truth and Rhythm designs are in, and they look pretty darn cool. So show your support, help support the program, and show off some stylish merchandise and apparel. Only at the Funkin' Stuff store. You had mentioned Lenny White already. He's been on the show, Love Lenny. And 29, that record that you're on with them, was that one of the ones that had any of the hits like Peanut Butter or Kid Stuff? Or
Oh yeah, I did 3 albums with Lenny. The first one was Best of Friends. And that had Peanut Butter on it. Yes, I'm on all that stuff. All those 3 albums, I played guitar on. That was, working with Lenny was just, wow. It was really very special. And the band was so amazing. And, and Lenny, and I've spoken to him subsequent to that, but really complimented him on how the heck did he keep a bunch of crazy, talented players, just keep everybody focused. It was really, looking back on it, man, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because we were young and we were crazy, and everybody was playing their asses off, and just trying to harness that and kind of direct that in a way was really, my hat's off to Lenny for that.
you played live shows too with that lineup?
Yeah, yeah. I toured a lot we toured quite a bit. It was great and recorded. It was a great experience, man. That was kind of like, that was like university. It's like, all the different things are like different types of education, and working with Lenny was really interesting because we were doing that sophistifunk stuff, but also we were doing a lot of stuff from the fusion side of him live. So when we played live, it was a really comprehensive circle of music from Lenny's career. So it was really very cool.
That is really cool. He's had such a great, varied career musically. He's gone everywhere.
Incredible. It's an incredible drummer. He's an artist. He's a drummer. He's a composer. He's composing classical music now. It's just, he's an inspiration.
I had Lynn Davis on just the other day, and she actually mentioned she appeared on American Bandstand, I think, with 29.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I remember that. I think we did that show with Shalimar, and I think we taped, they taped more than one show, and I think Shalimar was there that day. And yeah, Lynn's an old friend. Oh my God, just a dear friend, an amazing singer, absolutely amazing.
And Bernard Edwards, you spent some time working with him from Chic.
And my dear friend Bernard, I miss him. He was another mentor of mine. I'd finished touring with let's see, I figure worked with Lenny up until around 81. Then I worked with Stanley Clarke and George Duke, the Clark Duke Project. Did a lot of touring with them, and then I did a stint with Blondie's last tour. This is 82. So I worked with Blondie And then after that, I decided to, I want to stay in New York. I want to kind of crack the studio scene. I really want to get my foot in that door, because it's a really kind of a very cliquey kind of dynamic. At least it was back then, and you just need to wait for your opportunity, or try to make an opportunity. So I reached out to Bernard, because I had heard that he and Niall had kind of like parted ways. They were just really working on their solo producers career, respectively. And I had heard that Bernard was working on a solo album. And I called the studio up and I said, "Can I speak to Bernard?" And they put me through to him. And, I'd known him, but I hadn't seen him in a while, but we'd known each other, but we'd never really played together. And I said, "Hey, I heard you're, making a record. And, if you, I'd love to play on it. If there are any opportunities for me to play on, or any songs you want me to play on, just let me know. I'd love to do it." He says, "Man, why don't you come down to the studio tomorrow?" He said. So I went down to the studio the next day, and when I got to the studio, he was up the street on there was a Thai restaurant on Broadway and 54th, and was it 8th Avenue? It was 8th Avenue and 54th Street. And I walked in there, and he was having a bite to eat, and I sat down, spoke with him, and he said, "Man, come down to the studio tomorrow, man. Bring your guitar and play on this track." So went down to the studio, and it's the first time I met Jason Corsaro, who was became one of my best friends as well, and worked on this track. And Bernard left the studio, man. He just let me do my thing, So a couple of hours later, he comes back, and he loved it. He says, "Man, come on down tomorrow, man. I got plenty more shit for you to play on. So come on down." So that began our association, and we played on so many projects through the years, and we collaborated with this band that we had called Distance, and I learned so much from Bernard, because he had enormous ears, and he knew how to get to the source of what made a song great. So he was able to reduce as he was producing. So he was able to strip down, what wasn't necessary to kind of create a diamond, and it was wow, what a great bassist. What a great bassist. I mean, he just had an undeniable feel and sound to his approach on the instrument. Very unique. And it's really interesting that the great players, there's something to their note value that is different. Yes, it may be a quarter note or a dotted eighth or whatever, but the way they're hitting it, the way they're attacking it, and the way they're playing it, it just seems to have a style of its own within the context of what is written or what it is. And that's what he had in droves, which made him a unique bassist with a really an amazing voice on the instrument.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like he was a pleasure to work with too. So.
Oh yeah, he was. Bernard was funny. He was always a bundle of laughs. And but his ears were so big. His approach to producing was so organic, and it was so natural that there was never a combative element in the process of making a record with Bernard. There was just a vibe, a relaxation, and an emphasis on really trying to create some magic. And that's what was so great about him. And it was always a learning experience in terms of, because for him, it was how it felt, how the music made you feel. Sometimes people are looking at precision or whatever, and they're looking for a different aspect of what is perfect to them. But I think Bernard was able to tap into an aesthetic that, kind of went beyond what was happening musically there. For example, the Riptide album that he produced for Robert Palmer, he knew when he had enough. He knew when there was enough on tape that okay, let's stop here. We have enough. He was able to really determine that and therein create a discipline that, you know, when you have someone that's producing a record that you feel comfortable with enough to say, I really think we have enough. And then, you know, to heed that advice and then it be such an enormous success is really something to say about a producer.
Yeah, I'm thinking probably, I mean, most of the ones that are really exceptional have that gift.
Mhm.
That's part of what, you know, that gift means.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, you feel it, you know, when there's enough. And you know, and that's really important because I've seen artists take such an excessive, and you know what? They're all equally successful. It's like everybody's got their own method to their madness. I mean, Jim Steinman was the opposite. I mean, Jim Steinman was, I mean, he was, oh man, back in the 2-inch days, it was like, you know, we had 12 reels of 2-inch tape on one track to mix down. You know, I mean, I literally had my own reel of 24 tracks, you know, for guitars, you know, and that was the way that was his method to his madness and enormously successful as well. So there's no real give or take as to what's the right way or the wrong way. But Bernard's way was so there was an authenticity to it that I felt was special.
And when you're talking about characters, got to bring up Don Blackman. You were on his record. That was a tremendous record.
Oh, tremendous! Don was Don and Denzel. Those two guys, and they played together with Lenny, you know, and two immensely talented musicians. Don Blackman, man, he believed in me so much. He just loved the way that I played. And that meant so much to me as a guitarist that he really loved the way that I played. And he needed to have me on his album. And that meant so much to me because he was such an enormous talent, enormous. I mean, not only from his compositional, he was prodigious as a composer and he had perfect pitch. And he just heard stuff and he was just really, he was on a quest. And for him to really want me to be a part of it, it meant so much to me. It's also the first time I heard Dennis Chambers too. And I mean, what an amazing musician, you know, and it was a heady experience working with Donald. It was organic, man. It was just like heavy.
Did you do any shows with him? I heard he used to do some crazy stunts on stage sometimes.
Oh, we did. You know, I did one show with it. It was in DC. It was a Black Chamber of Commerce show, and, and Donald just took it all left, man. I think Charlie Drayton was on the gig. I think I forget who else was on the gig, man. But it was like. It was Cosmos, man. It was Cosmos funk, and he took a tablecloth, and he took the tablecloth from one of the tables and cut a hole in it and pulled it over his head, so he had like this cape. He looked like some sort of you know, superhero kind of cat. You know, he was just traipsing around the stage with this tablecloth on his back, and it was hilarious, man. The guy was just he was free, and that's how it manifested in his music and his persona and his vibe on stage. Total genius, Don Blackman. Miss him really.
Absolutely. And you came out with your own record in '84, right? That No Lies project.
Yeah. Bernard facilitated that. It's really interesting. From doing sessions with Bernard, he'd hear me noodling on stuff, you know, and he heard this tune. He heard this riff from this song that I wrote called Trudy. And he, you know, I would always in between takes or whatever, and I'm just noodling around and I'm just like, you know, playing the And he says, hey, he said, would you want to cut that as a demo and let's see if we can get you a record deal? I says, sure. So we cut that with Steve Ferroni, Denzel Miller, myself and Bernard, and Jason Corsaro behind the board. We cut that, and that enabled me to get my record deal. They heard it and they wanted to do it, and got a deal with Cotillion Records, and Bernard produced it. Actually, that's Bernard's. He told me that was the nucleus for what became Power Station. Subsequent to that, it was really his first, I think, one of his first solo productions, if it wasn't his first, as outside of his own solo album. It was great fun to make that record. It was just an experience. It was really, it's really something when you get your first record deal. Even though when I was with Mother Night, I was like 19 when we had the deal, and I wasn't really writing. I was just starting to really write. So there were none of my songs on the Mother Night album, but for the single that came out a year or two later. So all of a sudden, I'm responsible, for all the songs and all the lead vocals, because I sang before I played guitar professionally, and my first lead vocal was on Lenny's album, the third 29 album. It's called "Need You" is the name of the song. The name of the album eludes me right now, but it's the third album, and so that was my first foray into doing lead vocals. And then so I've got my own record deal, and I'm got to get my songs together, and it was really an incredible experience. It was an incredible experience to go in, cut my own tracks, do my vocals, and really kind of like, it's me, it's my music, it's my songs. And that was an enormous moment for me, and Bernard facilitated that. These guys, they believe in you, they believe in you more than in some ways that you believe in yourself. And to have those kind of people through the years that maybe see something in me that I didn't see myself, that's enormous. That's enormous, Scott. I can't even begin to convey the sense of gratitude that I have for that.
How comfortable did you feel being more up front, as opposed to in the background? And did you do any shows at that point, just, with this material, or not?
No, I didn't do any live shows. Unfortunately, it's really interesting. The reviews of the album were really positive. I mean, they played it on American Bandstand when that was the barometer, you know what I mean? And, Spin a Record, it did like my goddaughter called me up and said, Uncle Eddie, they played your record on American Bandstand. They got like a 94 or something like that, but it kind of fell on deaf ears at the record label. It was really interesting. They didn't know how to categorize me. They didn't know whether it was R&B or rock, or, it was just really, and, it's like, hey, just if it's good, it's good. It's like, but, unfortunately, they just didn't know how to connect with marketing it in a way that more people would have heard it. So it's unfortunate, but it was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah. So just obviously continue to your growth in all musical aspects. And you had, you're working with people like Kashif, Billy Ocean, Nona Hendrix carryover from Labelle, George Howard, you mentioned Stanley Clarke, and you were on David Lee Roth's. I think that was his solo debut, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. That was really interesting. I mean, when I think about all those things happening, it's just like, it's like you start off, you can't get arrested, it's like, and you just put one foot in front of the other, and you take the defeats and you just dust them off, you know what I mean, and you just keep pursuing, and you just want to keep those opportunities happening. And there was a point in the early 80s where there was just a harmonic convergence where everything just kind of like, everything just fell in sync, and all these opportunities just started happening. And I just love the diversity of it, Scott. I just love the diversity of, doing something with George Howard, and then doing something, with, Run-DMC and with Lenny, and doing my own thing. It was a very fruitful and robust time where, all the years that you're starving and trying to get ahead and trying to make some sense of this business, finally it becomes a synchronicity where for at least several years there are things that are happening that are just really kind of like, it's just, I was attracting all these myriad artists to want me to play on their record. And it was fantastic. It was just fantastic.
And then you mentioned Robert Palmer. He came shortly after that, and Mick Jagger was in the mix.
Yeah, I've been working with Bill Laswell, and I was on a rehearsal at a rehearsal studio on 30th Street somewhere, and I get a call. My wife called the studio, and she said, Bill Laswell wants to know whether you can be in the Bahamas tomorrow to record with Mick Jagger. I said, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I just hopped on a plane, went down to the Bahamas, and worked on Mick's album. And it was great. Sly and Robbie were there. Michael Shreve was there. Michael Henderson was there. Jeff Beck. And we started cutting tracks, and I'd worked with Sly and Robbie before with Bill Laswell. So it was great to see them. They were happy to see me, and we started cutting tracks. He says, man, we've been trying to cut tracks for about a week now or so. It's just, man, and so, I mean, there was one track that we cut. It was just like, I think it was the title track was the first thing I worked on. And we cut it in 2 takes. And man, we've been trying to get this track for a while. I guess they didn't have any kind of like real funky rhythm stuff to kind of glue what was happening, so it really worked. It needed some really shang-a-lang stuff going on there, because Jeff was doing his thing, was just like, oh man, working with Jeff Beck was just so great.
Was that the first time you got to meet him?
No, actually, Carmine Rojas and myself, we were playing with, we were recording in San Francisco, making the Chameleon album. And back in those days, Bill Graham used to have his Day on the Green. And I think it took place, it was at Oakland Stadium where the Oakland A's played. And so many people were on the bill. Carlos Santana, Jeff Beck, I forget who else was on the bill. A long story short, we see Jeff Beck talking to Carlos Santana, me and Carmine, and we walk up to Jeff Beck and we introduced ourselves. And, I said, man, you are a sick MF, I told him. And he understood where I was coming from. I said, man, you're a bad MF. He just did this Cheshire grin, man. It was like so cool. He just smiled and he got it, and that was really a term of endearment from us.
And was that when he was with the Jan Hammer band and had that
Yep.
kind of,
yeah, with Fernando Saunders on bass and stuff. Was an old buddy of mine still to this day, and those were good times. Long time ago, but it was good. There was so much stuff going on. It was a very fruitful time. And it's the live music was so much more prevalent, and there was just every cylinder was kind of kicking in those days relative to what mid-late 70s through the 80s to the early 90s. It was a really kind of like it was really an amazing time.
So many players just kicked ass. I mean, just so many virtuosos. And also just, experimentation and blending and mixing and just,
yeah. Even the aspects of recording were changing. I mean, the 80s were, these big dense reverbs and, all that, and big, amazing drum sounds. I mean, Jason Corsaro was like really one of the purveyors of the sounds of that time, everything from Power Station to Madonna's first album to Soundgarden, recorded all that stuff on Super Unknown. He was just really a real pioneer, from the aspect of recording. He was just he broke all the barriers. He's really a sonic iconoclast, in my opinion, and he was a really incredible engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I would describe some of that with Bill Laswell also, who you just mentioned, and
yeah.
your story with Mick Jagger reminds me of the one Bernard Fowler told me about, how he got introduced through Laswell to Mick also. It was kind of a crazy story.
Oh, man, with Bill Laswell, man. I mean, I worked on so many kind of interesting projects. Ryuichi Sakamoto was really one of the highlights, working with Ryuichi, and then working on the Sly and Robbie album. I think it was called Barriers or something like that. If I, you know, and man, Bill, man, his style of, it's so many, these great producers, man, they have their style, man. It's like, it's kind of like, Bill didn't have to communicate very much with me in terms of what he was looking for, because he would either put, the track would have been up already or something like that. And he would just like, here, check it out. And I would hear stuff, and he liked what he liked what I was doing, so it was that kind of a process. And he'd give me these little signals, some funny kind of insular shit, you know what I mean? Like when it was happening, you know what I mean? It's like, it's really, I mean, oh man, working with Bill was a joy. It was always a snap, always fun, always creative. And if you heard shit, he would let you go. He would let you go and just search. And what more can you ask for?
Yeah, well, you have a guy there who really apparently is not very concerned about sales and record companies. He just wants to, push the envelope.
True. Yep. Always a pleasure with that guy.
You also recorded with Steve Winwood several times.
Yeah, I recorded, I remember I worked on oh gosh, Back in the High Life, Higher Love, and Freedom Overspill. Those are the two tracks that I worked off on that album. Steve Winwood is just, wow. When I was putting guitars on those tracks, actually Jason was engineering when I put my guitars on. And I'm listening to these reference vocals that sound so damn good. And, Russ Adam's saying, oh, those are some reference vocals. Shit, they sound like keepers to me. I mean, really just a wonderful musician. I mean, Steve Winwood is a great musician, artist, very particular, very, very, very kind of focused, really razor-like focus on the musicality of everything that he does. Nice guy. I haven't seen him in a long time, but a wonderful, wonderful guy and musician.
How many of these did you have a sense were going to be major hits? Like, did you think the David Lee Roth was going to be a big hit? Did you think that the Steve, Higher Love was going to be a big hit, and so on?
I knew that the Higher Love and Freedom Overspill were going to be big records. You get that feeling. Addicted to Love, I knew was going to be a big hit. Simply Irresistible, I knew that was going to be enormous. And when Robert's album came out, they put Discipline of Love, which is a killer track, but to me, it's not a #1 song. And Bernard said he was going to have some meetings with Island Records because he was imploring that they release Addicted to Love. And the rest is history. They released that, and it just methodically went up the charts. It went straight to #1. And Simply Irresistible, I think it went to #1 worldwide. I think in the States it went to #2. Bobby McFerrin's tune, Don't Worry.
Be Happy.
And but to me, I mean, Robert's tune is much more significant, impactful, kind of emblematic of that decade than Don't Worry, Be Happy. No offense to Mr. McFerrin, but my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. So
Yeah.
What was Robert Palmer like to work with?
The absolute best. The absolute best. Robert was always about the music. he was such a musicologist in this, from the aspect that he listened to everything. I mean, he can go from Billie Holiday to Sepultura, you know, in a heartbeat and have it on the same cassette. I mean, he was just all about music. He was really into African music and South African music in particular, juju and high life and things like that. And he really studied it. He studied it with African percussionists, so he really knew about juxtaposing rhythms and things like that. He was really a wonderful person to work with and explore with. And it's like, you know, what the solo on Simply Irresistible, which is not, you know, it's not your typical, you know, rock or pop solo. It's really kind of like, it's like a hodgepodge of like, you know, intervallic openings and, you know, like almost like a quasi chromatic boppy kind of heavy metal riff, and then some sonic dive bombs, and then almost like a whole tone scale that is descending, you know, at the end of it. And I wasn't conscious of what I was doing. That's what I was hearing, you know, and that's how it came out. And Robert loved it, you know, and it was really kind of, I mean, you're thinking it's like, you know, over 30 years ago. And it was really kind of radical when I think about it relative to, from the aspect of what top 40 radio was about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really proud of that from the aspect that he was willing to, you know, take a chance with something that was really out of the box in terms of how I approached the guitar solo. It was a heck of a lot of fun to do, and to see it just really blossom and become an enormous hit was just really, was really, really cool. And it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Robert was the kind of guy that he was so consistent in his character and his demeanor. And he was pragmatic, but he was always cool. He was always affable. He was always approachable. Never any of these rock and roll star airs, you know, none of, you know, because there's some rock stars, they could be, you know, they're cool, and then the next day you're around them and it's like they got their shades on and they don't speak to anybody. You know what I mean? It's like you've got these wide spectrums of attitude, you know, and Robert was always the same way. It was just like really kind of like even keel, you know, and a great sense of humor. And, you know, just had the greatest experiences with Robert on stage and in studio and just hanging out. He's another guy that I miss dearly.
Wow. So in general, when you would work with these guys and these, let's say, contrast, if you would, you know, more of a pop approach like a Robert Palmer or Steve Winwood versus maybe some of the more esoteric stuff that you did. In general, how much would you be guided in what you were expected to play or produce versus coming up with it on your own, like you did with that solo you were just talking about?
Well, you know, as you evolve as a musician or as a studio player, and in some ways, it's kind of like if someone's an actor and they're all of a sudden like in an enormous movie, you know, and they're going to want that guy because he did that. And in some ways, that's what happens to you. I tell people you have to be able to hear shit. And what I mean by that is that, you know, a lot of the times you get to the studio and there's like a rough track, but there are a lot of holes. And you've got to hear stuff to fill those holes up, and things that are kind of complementary to the music, to the melody, what's being sung, and how to create parts and things to fundamentally structure the song foundationally, as we spoke before. And then also to be able to hear stuff that really complements in terms of flourishes and little sparkles and things like that, depending on where the song is. And I just love that, you know, because sometimes you're working on things that it's all inside. It's all that kind of inside chordal stuff that you're doing that's really supplementing a vocal or augmenting what a keyboard player is doing or what a bass player is doing. And it's that kind of, all that stuff that sits right there that creates that bed. I love that too, as much as I you know, love doing the big crunchy guitar solos on Addicted to Love. But I was fortunate that I had opportunities to do both. So I really wasn't typecast. I mean, there were some producers that called me up for just the clean funky and the pop stuff, like Russ Teileman would call me up for funk pop and funk stuff mostly. Then Jim Steinman would call me up for big Mondo guitars and also clean stuff and acoustics, and Robert would call me up to play the whole 360, because his music was really kind of all over the place. I mean, he's doing, doing Joe Beam tunes, and he's doing standards, and he's doing tunes that are really metally, and tunes that are pop rock, and that are funk pop, and it's like everything. And I love that, because I mean, when we worked on Heavy Nova, the first album, the first day that I just got off the plane, and I'm playing on this tune, this bossa nova tune called Between Us, and it was acoustic, and and you never know what it's going to be. That's what was so much, that was so much fun, is the unknown.
Now, it wasn't on here, but I am pretty sure that you played with Trouble Funk and also with Bootsy. Is that right?
I actually, that was with Bill Laswell, and that was at Quadraphonic Studios in New York. That's quite a while ago. And I remember working on a bunch of tracks. Dennis Chambers played on some of that stuff. It was Jason was on the console, I believe, recording. That was some funky stuff. I don't know if I know that it's come out, but I haven't heard it in so long, and I don't know whether I heard the iterations that I played on, but I know I played on some of that stuff, and it was great fun. It was funkin' and it was rocking, and Bootsy Collins is a bad cat. He is a bad cat, and he's a great rhythm guitarist too. He can play some funky ass rhythm guitar, big time. Because his brother was just a master of that when they played with James Brown. So he's got that thing going on big time. Absolute, so much fun working with Bootsy Collins, man. What a talent. It's great. And then working with Bill, oh man. Oh man, that's some great stories, man. Great stories of recording with those guys, some funny shit.
Well, I have Stevie Silva, and he was on that Bootsy record too. I know that was one of his early gigs.
He's on there too, and Stevie worked with Bootsy quite a bit. Stevie's an old buddy of mine, man. Gosh, we go back.
And then Jody Watley, you're on her record?
Yeah. Worked with Jody, and gosh, I remember her when she was. I think I remember when I did when Labelle was on Soul Train. I think she was probably one of the dancers. She and Jeffrey Daniels, I think. I know Jeffrey was a Soul Train dancer, and they both wound up being in Shalimar with Howard Hewitt, And so yeah, I did work on her solo album with Bernard. That was great fun. That was a really good record.
And Tina Turner, you've worked with many times, right?
Yeah, I worked with Tina. First time I worked with Tina was at Live Aid with Jagger. And the first time I met her was really, we had a rehearsal the night before at JFK Stadium. And it was just about late afternoon, early evening. It was not quite dusk yet, but it was like an empty JFK Stadium except for the crew and the riggers and everybody, on stage, and the techs and stuff in the band. And we ran through the set that we were going to do the following night at Live Aid. And man, that was so electric. That was amazing, because when you rehearse with Jagger, it's 110%. Even if it's at a sound check or rehearse, it was balls to the walls, metal to the pedal. It was just insane. I'm saying, oh man, this is going to be insane. So the following night comes in, it's about 10:30. We go on somewhere around there, and the energy from the audience, Scott, was so profound. It was like they were matching the decibels that we were putting out on the stage. So it was like these two enormous energies kind of, meeting together. And it was the fastest 20 minutes of my life. It was amazing. The energy was so profound. And even this is well before, smartphones and cameras and stuff. But it seemed as if everyone in that audience had a flash. So I'm seeing flashes as I'm looking out into the abyss. But all you're seeing is all these little sparkles, from people taking photographs or whatever. It was really an amazing feeling, an amazing feeling. And so much energy. You just, like, after you finish doing a show like that, you put down your instrument, but you're still on. You know what I mean? There's so much adrenaline, so much energy that, it's wow. It's really amazing.
Yeah. How do you ever wind down and get to sleep after that?
You don't. You're just, watch an old movie forever. Oh.
Mick Jagger is just like a wonder of nature or something, because I understand the shows they're doing now that he's 78. He's running around for 2.5 hours and like a 40-year-old.
Yeah, he's in incredible shape. He's always been, when I worked with him quite extensively on his album, so I worked with him in the Bahamas and worked with him in New York when we recorded at Power Station for really quite a bit. I worked with, I think, almost, not every rhythm section, but almost every rhythm section on that record. I worked with Michael Shreve and Michael Henderson, Sly and Robbie. When you think about that album, what was cut and what was released are two different things. So I cut tracks with Steve Gadd, Will Lee, Richard T., and Sid McGuinness on one track. Then cut tracks with Anton Fag and Will Lee, Steve Ferroni and Bernard Edwards. There's so much stuff in the can. So much stuff in the can from that She's the Boss album. And actually there are some songs that wound up on subsequent albums, but they recut them with their other players that they were using at the time, that Mick was using at the time. So, but that's some really cool. There's a track with Gadd and Will Lee and Richard T. That's just killing.
So it must boggle your mind sometimes what does not come out.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it does. There's a lot of stuff in the can that I guess eventually, if they choose to, they'll release someday. I'm wondering about with Robert I'm wondering if there's anything in the can that we did that hasn't been released. I know there's some obscure things that were B-sides of certain singles. That there's a tune called "Remember to Remember," and then there's this funk tune, "So Emboldened." Man, dial that up. That is a funky tune. "So Emboldened" with Claire Fisher's strings on there. It's nasty.
You worked with Chaka Khan?
Yeah, I worked. I worked on an album of hers with oh man, the bass player. Oh, his name eludes me. Could be Brathwaite. Wayne Brathwaite, I think, was a bass player. Great bass player. He passed away years ago, and he produced that album. I played on tracks on that, and then I did something with Russ Teidelman for Chaka, for that that movie that came out with Run-DMC and Sheila E. Crush
Groove.
Yeah.
Crush Groove, yeah.
Yeah. Did a track with Chaka, and then also did something with Arif and Philippe Sace for the Miami Vice soundtrack back in the day. So yeah, there have been several tracks that I worked on of Chaka's.
So
singer Chaka. I mean, just really, it's kind of like when you think about the great singers of our time, the Aretha, Patti LaBelle, Chaka Khan, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight, then you have like the Ella Fitzgeralds and the Sarah Vaughns and stuff like that, and Peggy Lee, and just great singers of that style. But they're kind of like they almost kind of reincarnated in a modern context, because there's such there are very interesting parallels relative to presence and voice and things like that. It's amazing.
Yeah, Chaka happens to be my number one female singer.
Oh man, she's got a texture, and her phrasing, and I just love how certain vocalists pronounce certain letters, certain phrases, and Chaka has a way of pronouncing the letter R in some of the words as she's singing, that it just, like, say, a song, I forget, but like if she's singing together, just the way that last syllable,
Yeah,
there's something that she does, man. When she hits an R, it just kills me. It's just like, okay, I just fall on the floor and just, amazing.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I never thought about it in that term, but you're totally right. Yeah, I hear it. So you mentioned the Live Aid show. I was certainly going to ask you
Oh
to
yeah,
pick. I was going to ask you if there were one or two shows that you've done that were the most unforgettable. And it sounds like the Live Aid was certainly one of them, I'm
yeah.
guessing. But were there some others
There
that?
were, there were several with Robert Palmer that were just really incredible, and they weren't always like the massive big gig. We played Wembley, the indoor Wembley, and that was good. That was big, but we did a show in Camden at a venue called Town and Country, and we did two shows there, and those shows were really, really unbelievable. It was just like magical, and the music transcends, and you just kind of go clear. There was an expression we used in those days when uh, when the energy and the music just kind of become one, and you kind of like in another dimension, that you're just, it's equivalent to to an athlete being in a zone, you know and that really happens for musicians too. You get into this different plane, and that happened several times. And I remember one time it happened in a club in Munich, and Robert had a penchant for for working in, you do the Odeon Hammersmith, and you play the big venues, and all of a sudden you go into some funky club in Munich. So we were playing in Munich, and my buds from Rod Stewart's band, they had a night off, so they came down to check out our show in this funky club in Munich. And it was just one of those nights, and it was just really special, really, really special. The whole tour was special, but those were the standout shows. And I just loved it because it was one of those tours that the production it wasn't like a fancy stage with all this kind of fancy pyrotechnic and all that kind of shit. It was just a back line, and it was, and just everybody was just really, all cylinders were kicking in, and those are some great moments. But those moments are so special, so special.
Yeah, and the audience feels that too. I mean, it's what's special
Yeah,
all around. It's just everyone becomes, one really, on this.
yeah. The energy is reciprocal, and that's what's so beautiful. It's kind of like, sometimes you do some gigs and the audience is kind of like, okay, show me, and that happens, and like it's usually the bigger markets too. It's you go to other markets, and people are so much more appreciative of what you're doing, and there's a genuine sense of gratitude, and they reciprocate in kind, with just loving what you do, and they demonstrably show you that. And when they do that, it just makes you want to give everything you have feasibly possible, energy wise, to give them and leave them with. And to me, that's what it's about.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. and become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.